Hello.
Hi.
Hiya.
Hey.
Welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And that was our dramatic reenactment of the curt exchange between the Cambridges and Sussexes at the Commonwealth service.
As revealed to us by an unnamed expert lip reader at the Telegraph, possibly second only to the lip reading of what Prince William said at the Commonwealth Day service. Now, we talked last week about how Will was making jokes about coronavirus, but it seems to have hit home for the future king. He told Kate he finds the handshaking ban imposed on guests weird. Here's what he said, okay? We can't shake hands and we have to hold back. We will have to put on loads of hand gel afterwards. I am not used to it. It feels weird.
How much hand gel does he put on?
This is how you keep the romance alive.
I'm talking about how much gel you have on your hands. We thought we would do a quick roundup of what's going on with coronavirus with the royal family before not talking about it again.
Yeah, we can't ignore what Alexandra Burke calls the elephant in the room.
Nobody wanted to talk about it, so there was an elephant in the room.
So you might remember last week we were talking about how Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had taken some heat for their decision to leave Archie in Canada while they returned to the UK for their little farewell tour. But we heard from the Telegraph this week that their decision came not out of petty spite, as reported in some areas, but out of concern for his health during the threat of a global pandemic. So this is looking a lot more sensible this week after they got so much criticism for it last week. We heard that the Queen had cancelled her upcoming engagements in Cheshire and Camden, but she was having some private audiences at Buckingham Palace this week and decided not to wear gloves for these. So I guess it's kind of like tricky because obviously people are looking to her as an example of how they should respond to coronavirus. So in a way it's like, is she trying to be reassuring people that they shouldn't panic? Or really, when you're about to turn 94, should you be a little bit more careful?
Yeah, exactly. She should be taking leaf out of Charles's book with his total embrace of namaste.
Oh my god, if you guys haven't seen this incredible video of Charles arriving at the London Palladium this week for a Princess Trust event, we retweeted it on Twitter at AirheadsPod if you want to check it out. But he goes to shake someone's hand and then like swoops his hand away and sort of giggles. It's so funny before greeting them with a namaste, which I loved.
It's so good. It was reported that the Queen was squirreling herself away at Windsor, though. But apparently it's just like a normal everyday, or every weekend rather, trip to Windsor, and she will be back in Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, we know she always spends the weekends at Windsor Castle, but according to royal aides, she is expected to be at Buckingham Palace this week, as is normal. We had heard that she might have been quarantined up in Sandringham with Prince Philip. Dear God.
Clearly she chose anything other than that.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to change, though. Like, we saw that Charles and Camilla have called off, that they were meant to go on tour next week to Bosnia and Herzegovina and Jordan and Cyprus, but those have all been postponed to an, as of yet, unannounced later date. But really, we want to get into the drama of this week. So, speaking of Charles's namastes, we first saw him throwing these out at the Commonwealth Day service on Monday.
This was the occasion where the Queen chose to give a totally tone-deaf speech on the importance of diversity.
I know, the very last royal engagement for Harry and Meghan, and the Queen is like, I'm going to give this lovely, thoughtful speech about diversity and inclusion as we boot out our most diverse member of the family. She said, on Commonwealth occasions, it is always inspiring to be reminded of the diversity of the people and countries that make up our worldwide family. We are made aware of the many associations and influences that combine through Commonwealth connection, helping us to imagine and deliver a common future. Such a blend of traditions serves to make us stronger individually and collectively by providing the ingredients needed for social, political and economic resilience.
I mean, no wonder Meghan was grinning at this event, because she was like, this is hilarious.
The big moment, though, that we were all waiting for and watching eagerly was when Harry and Meghan and Will and Kate were to meet for the first time publicly for the first time since Harry and Meghan were announcing that they were going to leave. Before that, though, there was a little bit of drama around the procession and who was going to be walking in with the Queen and who was going to walk in before the Queen. And it's like a little bit confusing, and, you know, there's been a lot of spin around it, which we can talk about, but we don't really know what happened exactly. Basically, Harry and Meghan were going to walk in with Prince Edward and Sophie Wessex before the official procession with the Queen and Charles and Camilla and Will and Kate. But at the last minute, Will and Kate were removed from the procession, even though the order of service had already been printed saying that they would be joining the Queen's procession. So there was a little bit of like confusion over what prompted them to pull out, and we got a kind of a humdinger of an explanation from the Daily Mail.
Oh yeah, it was total spin, I took it as, from the Cambridges. So Daily Mail reported saying that Harry and Meghan were upset by the fact that they weren't going to be in the main procession, and that fearing another highly public royal skirmish, William and Kate stepped in to defuse the situation. Total heroes.
Yeah, we heard that Harry and Meghan were emotional and that this was Will and Kate's way of offering an olive branch to them, and that this was just like a really kind and generous and selfless gesture. I remember when we were talking about this during the week, you were saying that you thought it seemed plausible that Harry might have said something to the Queen about it looking particularly bad if they excised their one biracial member of the family and then got up and gave a big speech about diversity. Like, maybe nobody really cares about like the order of procession. It's such a stodgy institutional thing, but that's what the family's all about. So it's these really finicky details that matter so much to all of these people, which is hilarious.
And they totally overlooked the detail that mattered to literally everybody else in the world, which is that just greet each other in a friendly manner. Just smile and say hello and, you know, look like you're pleased to see each other. That is the one thing people wanted to see.
But they absolutely could not manage to do that. For all the talk about the olive branch
and trying to avoid a scene, they ended up creating the most picked apart royal interaction for ages.
Yeah. I'm sure everybody has watched this by now 10 times, like us. But in case you haven't, we shall set the scene for you. In the second row, we have Harry, Meghan, Edward and Sophie, in case you were wondering, who's that guy beside Meghan? In the front row, we've got some empty seats, and then Will and Kate come along to take these seats, and we see Meghan smiling her beautiful Hollywood smile, saying what looks to be hello.
And is certainly reported by lip readers as hello.
Harry also gives what looks like a tight smile and seems to be exchanging some sort of greeting. But from what I could see, they got a barely perceptible hi or something from Will and totally shut down by Kate.
Yeah. She turned the other way.
You know, maybe she did have one of her big grins on that was just invisible to the rest of us, but I doubt it.
But I mean, that's why this is such a, like, magic moment, because we can read whatever we want onto what happened.
Yeah, people have been writing some really wild fan fiction about this moment, which I guess we are too. But I thought it was really indicative of how bad things are. You know, if this is a family that is so concerned with optics and like whose main job basically is public relations, and they can't even muster a smile for each other or to put on a show of doing small talk, wave, whatever it is. It could be something tiny, and they couldn't even do that much.
This is a family who have, like, had to meet dictators and pretend like it's just part of their job. You know, be diplomatic. That's the whole thing. And they can't do that with each other for, like, basically 15 minutes before the service starts.
Yeah. It was such a failure. I was so shocked. I really, because I was looking forward to seeing some like really goofy, overdone, oh, hi, how's it going? How are you? Oh my God. You know, really fake kind of, but in a funny way. And that would be a testament to me of how much they're hoping to show people like that they can carry on with all of this and their desire for the dust to settle on all of the conflict stories. But they couldn't even do that.
Because it seemed like, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we saw stories about how, like, Will and Harry are leaving on great terms. The rift has been healed. That just seems to be totally forgotten now. Like, they're not even pretending like that's a thing.
I know. By the end of the service, when they were leaving, there's, like, the photo of them walking out of Westminster Abbey is pretty shocking.
Yeah, I mean, Harry's got a real, like, mugshot face. He's, like, furious. He looks borderline dangerous.
I know. And Kate just looks, like, so cranky and just, like, can't wait to get out of there. Meghan still has this, like, smile on her face. I couldn't believe that people were having a go at Meghan for, like, her rictus grin and her permanent smile. Like, it was a crime to look like she was making an effort.
Meghan's just like, this is just doing a long take. It's just a long take, and then we're going to wrap, and I'm going to head back to the trailer.
People were using that against her, though, and saying, well, she's the only one who's a trained actress in that family. Like, bullshit, guys. All those people are doing a lot of acting a lot of the time. Their whole thing is, like, performative grace and classiness, and that they can't even put it on for just that instant when they first greeted each other.
Yeah, that's all it would have taken.
It was a flop, you guys.
Yeah. I mean, maybe even they didn't expect the amount of analysis that would be going in, because it's a pretty rare occasion that you get expert lip readers brought in.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. But the Telegraph had one on hand to help decipher what may have been said in this terse exchange.
Okay, let's do this. William says,
hello,
to Meghan, and Harry replies,
hiya,
back. Meghan then says,
hi,
to William, who turns around and sits down in the row in front next to Kate.
How do we do?
We then got another little detail about what Harry said to Meghan, or what his lips said to Meghan. He literally said, hello, Harry, and that was it. And he didn't say anything more than that. So this was immediately interpreted as Harry talking about his greeting with Will. The lip reader does emphasise that Harry could have been talking about any of the politicians or dignitaries he had met beforehand, such as Boris Johnson.
I know Harry has been very publicly saying, call me Harry, but I still don't think that certainly any British dignitary is going to immediately go for the hi Harry as a greeting. So it does make more sense that he'd be talking about someone in his family.
Yeah.
But to add to all the drama of this event, people ran a piece saying that Prince Harry and Prince William's relationship is forever changed. So they had a source who was saying they won't get back to the way they were. Harry is looking straight ahead at his future with his family, and also saying that he is not looking back.
I mean, does this stuff come straight from Meghan? Like, people also talked about how Diana's wish was that the brother would always be close. I really hate this stuff, but they had Ingrid Seward, the royal biographer, saying, one thing Diana said was, please, whatever happens, remember you always have each other, and I want you always to stick together. And clearly that can't happen for a long time. It's so disgusting how people keep like holding Diana's legacy against her sons and using it as this kind of bat.
Yeah, to try and make them do what they want. Because, I mean, Diana probably would know better than anybody the intricacies of what happens with like royal marriages and the kind of competition that happens within the royal family. Like, she had to navigate all that herself. So taking a comment that she may have made to her like infant children and trying to apply it to them as adults just seems like really mean, actually. So while they're looking straight ahead, there are apparently some people that Harry and Meghan are going to miss from the UK because they threw a big farewell lunch for their team, their kind of now ex-staff, at the very swanky Goring Hotel.
Yeah, these were the pictures that we were talking about last week when people thought that they were staying at the Goring and getting all riled up about it. But according to page 6, they were actually having a very swish lunch. A royal source said Harry and Meghan have often done fun things like throwing pizza parties or hiring ice cream trucks for their staff, but they wanted to do something special going into this last week together. They toasted the team and thanked them for everything they've done. Some of the staffers cried. They've all been through so much together, and the staff have been working round the clock to make sure this last visit was as seamless as possible. Meghan and Harry really wanted to show their appreciation. They know how hard everyone has worked.
Well, just before we get into that, I just want to say Archie's going to have the best birthday parties ever if his parents are already like practicing pizza parties and ice cream. So good.
Practicing ice cream.
I'm a dedicated practitioner of ice cream myself.
Obviously, the way that this story came out, it was that Meghan and Harry made their staff cry. Which was so funny. But it just really undoes all those times we heard that Meghan was a fucking nightmare to work with and her staff couldn't bear to hang out with her. Like, we talked about this around the launch of the Smart Set collection when one of Meghan's former staff members came to the launch, even though apparently Meghan was a fucking diva bitch and she sends all her staff running for the hills. They don't seem to mind coming back.
Yeah.
That much less nice news, however, came on Tuesday. Just after they left, we got this really embarrassing story about Prince Harry. Apparently, he has fallen victim to Russian prank callers who were posing as the climate crisis activist Greta Thunberg and her father, Svante.
So this hasn't been confirmed or notably denied by the palace, which leads us to think that's probably true.
Especially because Omid Scobie, the royal commentator, who seems to have a lot of sources in the Sussex camp, said that he spoke to sources close to Harry about it. So, you know, we definitely think it's real.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that really confirmed it in my mind before we kind of heard Omid talking about it and other things kind of came out, it was the fact that very little of what Harry said was like really embarrassing or shocking. If you were using a voice actor and you wanted to make him look really stupid, you could have put in a lot more stuff that would make it seem like he was like a real idiot or a real hypocrite or something.
Yeah. And these hoaxers have form. They've previously targeted Elton John, Bernie Sanders, Joaquin Phoenix, Maxine Waters, the Turkish President Erdogan. Like, you know, they get up really high profile people.
Yeah. The pranksters in question are Vladimir Kuznetsov and Alexei Stolyarov, who go by the names Vovan and Lexus. And they spoke to Harry twice. So this was on New Year's Eve and on January 22nd. The calls of them were published on Monday. Recording of just, I think, one of the calls on YouTube and Facebook with a cartoon that shows Harry and Greta. They quickly transferred the rights up to the recordings to the British newspapers, though.
Yeah, basically, I think the Sun bought them.
Yeah.
But we got so many more, like, really embarrassing details. Like, apparently these guys contacted Harry using a fake email address they set up under the name of the then president of Switzerland, Uli Maurer. And the subject was call or meeting with Greta Thunberg. They sent emails to Harry and Meghan's Hollywood PR team at the beginning of December, and then they must have forwarded them on to Harry's personal email address because Harry replied to them from his own email address at the end of December and even called them on his personal mobile. Alexei, one of the hackers, told The Sun, "We were shocked when he emailed us. No one ever checked us out to see who we really were." There was a lot of consternation around how they would have been protected if they were still members of the royal family. This never would have happened if they were still working with the Palisades. And like, it was a very different time, but back in the 90s, this did happen to the Queen and Princess Diana.
And more recently, it happened almost to the Cambridges when reporters convinced nurses in the maternity ward where Kate was when she was pregnant that they were palace officials and they needed to speak to her. And one of the nurses revealed some like kind of private information to them. So just having royal processes on your side doesn't mean that you're like foolproof against these kind of calls.
And unfortunately, in the case of the Cambridges, that nurse tragically took her own life shortly afterwards. But like, even with the Queen, like, she ended up having a 17-minute phone call with this radio host who was pretending to be the Prime Minister of Canada, and she talked about like her Halloween plans. She talked about the weather. She talked about an upcoming referendum in Quebec, like lots of personal stuff. Some of the most choice excerpts from Harry's call with the fake Greta. The one that's gotten a lot of play is him talking about Donald Trump. He said the mere fact that Donald Trump is pushing the coal industry is so big in America, he has blood on his hands. But Trump will want to meet you to make him look better, but he won't want to have a discussion about climate change with you because you will outsmart him. I mean, is it any surprise that Harry is not a big fan of Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, whatever about his personal politics, like being married to an American, like Meghan is famously no fan of Trump.
I know, and it's so interesting because we've talked before about how part of what holds the royals back from their work having a really big impact is the fact that they have to be politically neutral, and they can't point the finger at people who are responsible for some of the biggest crises or who have a hand in making the climate crisis worse. They can't say that political leaders need to take responsibility the way that Harry is doing here.
Yeah.
So it shows that, you know, going forward with their activism, they are maybe going to be more outspoken.
Yeah. And I think it's like comments like this that maybe once Harry's initial anger or embarrassment at this coming out, he might be kind of pleased that some of his like true beliefs have been aired in this way, that like it's embarrassing, but people can't be as angry with him as if he had like released a statement saying these things.
Yeah. Another big headline from the call was Harry saying he was completely separate from the rest of the royal family. You know what? He was completely separate on the issue of Prince Andrew. Oh my God. I thought this was such a good comment from him.
Yeah.
You know, not very controversial, but also tells you a lot.
Yeah.
So he was asked about the allegations against Prince Andrew, and he said, I have very little to say on that, but whatever he has done or hasn't done is completely separate from me and my wife. We operate in a way of inclusivity and we are focusing on community, and so we are completely separate from the majority of my family.
It's so interesting because it's not only, you know, his comment on Andrew, but the whole rest of them he thinks aren't focused on community.
But it really shows that he's aware that while him and Meghan are being punished, Andrew is still very much in the royal fold and is being supported and protected by the majority of his family.
Yikes. He also talked about stepping down as working royal. Sometimes the right decision isn't always the easy one, and this decision certainly wasn't the easy one, but it was the right decision for our family, the right decision to be able to protect my son. And I think there's a hell of a lot of people around the world that can identify and respect us for putting our family first.
He also said, I was in the military for 10 years, so I'm more normal than my family would like to believe. But certainly being in a different position now gives us the ability to say things and do things that we might not have been able to do. I mean, maybe he's going to be wishing he didn't say some of these things.
Yeah.
But I thought that was so funny. I'm way more normal than my family thinks.
Just so normal. Prince Harry. He talked about the media as well. He said, I've always been part of a family and part of a country that is scared of the tabloid media because they have so much power and influence and no morals. Yikes. From the moment that I found a wife that was strong enough to be able to stand up for what we believe in together has basically scared them so much that they've now come out incredibly angry. they've come out fighting, and all they will try and do now is try and destroy our reputation and try and, sink us. But what they just don't understand is the battle we are fighting against them is far more than just us.
I think this is like the most unsympathetic moment of the conversation for me. Like, we know that Harry has a tendency to be paranoid about the media, and this is like taking that to kind of an extreme. Like, they're trying to sink us is really intense. But again, absolutely not a surprise. Like, we know how Harry feels about the media. He's made that very clear.
Yeah.
But this was just like, God, you kind of wish he would have a little bit more restraint.
Makes him sound like he's kind of losing it a little bit.
My next favourite moment was when he was talking about activism. And he said, I think people need to be woken up. And the only way to wake people up from what effectively is a consciousness crisis is, I think, you need to be doing extreme things. And small steps or giving out prizes doesn't make any difference these days. I think what you need to do is make real big changes that actually shock people. And it's that shock factor that wakes people up. This coming not even 3 weeks after Prince William announced the Earthshot Prize.
The Bullshot Prize.
Oh my God, so funny. Shout out to our listener Rachel for sending this to us, because I thought it was so hilarious.
Yeah, so good.
But some of the moments were just really humiliating, like when the fake Greta and her father said they had 50 penguins that were stuck in landlocked Belarus, and they were after a ship to transport these penguins to the North Pole, even though penguins are native to the South Pole. And Harry started talking about how he has a guy in Norway who can help them with it. It's like, oh God.
They also tricked him into believing mining companies close to Trump were exploiting the fictional island of Chunga Changa, the name of a Russian children's song, although he admitted he hadn't heard of the island, rather than like bluffing it out and pretending he knew all about it.
Yeah. I mean, there isn't really anything particularly outrageous or shocking about what he's saying. Like, it's not a big leap to imagine that he is not a fan of Trump. He's really not a fan of the media. Those things are things you would expect him to say anyway. But what really shocked me was, like, why the hell is he saying any of this to a 17-year-old girl I don't think he's ever met? It just seems so careless.
Yeah.
I just can't understand why he would feel comfortable sharing such strongly worded comments with a teenager.
Yeah, you'd understand the climate crisis talk.
Yeah.
That would be what any of us would probably talk to Greta about. But yeah, the stuff about his family, the stuff about the media. I mean, maybe the media, she has to deal with a lot of abuse as well, so maybe there's a link there. But it does seem very odd to me.
Overall, I think it was a very, very embarrassing incident for Harry, and one that kind of put a dampener on all the excitement and the goodwill of their farewell tour. But what really surprised me was we asked our followers on Instagram at AirheadsPod what they thought of the story, and the really overwhelming response was so many of you thought it was fake and didn't believe it. Rather alarmingly as well, a lot of you messaged us and told us not to read the tabloids, not to believe any stories about Harry and Meghan that were coming from anywhere other than their own Instagram or from the most supportive reporters.
That's not a good approach to it. Like, we need to be reading a lot of different takes on what's going on. We can't just take one side and disregard and refuse to engage with the other. The whole reason really that we were interested in the royal family, and the reason we started this podcast, is because of this sort of Game of Thrones in the media of like, who is saying what, why, how are things coming out, what is being said by unnamed people, who are these sources. Like, to cut out a whole load of that means that we won't be seeing the full picture, or even trying to guess the full picture.
Yeah, and I know sometimes the media gets it wrong, and sometimes they get it really wrong, but a lot of the times they get it right.
Yeah.
I think it makes a very interesting contrast with the very, very, very friendly coverage that Meghan received on her final engagement as a working royal, where they demonstrated their revised media policy with 3 hand-picked journalists invited to cover this engagement, which we learned about on the same day as this prank phone call.
Meghan's final engagement was on Monday, and she met 22 students who've received scholarships from the Association of Commonwealth Universities, which she's a patron of. She took over the patronage from the Queen in 2019, and she'll be continuing to work with them even after stepping back from their duties at the end of March. The engagement was shared by Sussex Royal on Instagram, with Miriam Makeba's Pata Pata, which is a South African song, playing in the background.
That was a great touch, I thought. Yeah. As well as the Sussex Royal Instagram post, we got 3 separate stories covering this event in Harper's Bazaar, The Telegraph and Town & Country magazine. I think there's a lot to parse in these 3 separate stories. So we'll start with the most friendly one, which is Omid Scobie's report for Harper's Bazaar, where it's kind of mixing reporting with an opinion piece, because he talks about his own work as a youngish biracial royal correspondent and how seeing Meghan and the change that she brought to the family was exciting. He writes that as their popularity grew around the world, so did a new golden era for the House of Windsor. As well as talking about this particular engagement, he kind of talks about their whole time in the royal family and what they brought to the family, and as well what they had wanted to continue to bring to the family with their proposed half-in, half-out arrangement. But he says that Harry and Meghan's hopes were quickly dashed by an institution seemingly unable to accept change as a viable option, even though some royals across Europe and even other members of the British royal family have succeeded in balancing duties to the crown and individual careers. And then he says, one can't help but wonder if things might have been different if a family member or two had stood up for them during the darkest times.
Which is very pointed, and I was kind of like, wow, when I read it, saying that in print. He also reported that the Secretary General of the ACU, Joanna Newman, had said that Meghan has been a fantastic amplifier of ACU messages to much broader audiences for us. And she recalls how Meghan started these public conversations about the lack of black professors and even period poverty. The headlines haven't been about what our patron is wearing, or the official engagement started at this time and ended at that time, and there was a cup of tea in the middle. It's about why we're doing what we do and why ACU exists. She's been a real champion of the work that universities do.
Then Omid adds that it's inspiring seeing someone so prepared for these types of engagements as opposed to just showing up for the photographs. Which I have to think is a little bit of a dig at the traditional royal way of doing things.
Yeah.
Not that I think that is the most effective way of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, we're big fans of the way Meghan has done these engagements and, what she's brought to them.
But it is quite unusual to hear from a royal correspondent, I thought.
Yeah.
As well, he goes on to say, for a couple who only ever wanted to focus on their work and bring good to the world, it seems like an unnecessarily cruel ending to their royal lives. Very strong words.
Yeah.
Very, very strong words. Unnecessarily cruel.
Yeah, and it is a very personal take on them and their story.
I think this is what I have a problem with, because of course he's entitled to share these opinions. It's particularly interesting to hear from him as a biracial royal correspondent when many of the royal correspondents are white and middle-aged and very traditional. So he's bringing a very fresh perspective to this, or a relatively fresh perspective, and that's really valuable. But I think the fact that presumably the Sussexes want this kind of coverage that combines objective reporting and an opinion and personal opinions, so blending a news report and a column is a very
slippery slope.
I just don't know if that's the best way to do things going forward. And I thought this kind of was exemplified in the Telegraph's piece by Bryony Gordon, which was billed as a column rather than a news report, because Bryony she does have a weekly column in the Telegraph. She does do features the odd time, but she's not really a reporter in the fact that news or the royals isn't her everyday beat. But she comes with quite florid language, as you would expect from a columnist or a features journalist.
Yeah.
She writes, "Tears glisten in those bright, friendly eyes that have charmed and endeared so many during recent days."
I mean, it's beautiful, and let's pop it in a novel.
How ironic that Meghan's final engagement was to be a Commonwealth service that celebrated diversity, uniqueness, and the strength we draw from embracing each other and our differences. As a final act of public duty, I cannot think of anything more poignant or perfect.
I mean, that as a final line, I can't think of a more poignant and perfect example of, like, this is the absolute flip side of the really vitriolic, angry articles about Harry and Meghan. And I don't think the answer to, you know, seeing that campaign, if you like, against them is to launch a counter one like this. Like, we need to be finding this objective reporting in the middle that is going to give us a sense of reality.
Yeah, and it also just seemed strange that Meghan wanted this final engagement she was doing reported in a column rather than in the news pages, because in the end, Bryony's column in the Telegraph is all about Meghan and very little about the actual engagement, which, as we know from stuff we've heard from Sussex communications team and stuff, they really don't want it to be all about Meghan. They don't want the headlines to be Meghan's emotional farewell or whatever. They want it to be on the work she's doing. And in choosing a very friendly journalist to cover it, they end up getting exactly what Meghan doesn't want.
Yeah. Weirdly, the most balanced piece came from Victoria Murphy at Town and Country. And I mean, I never thought I would be reading Town and Country magazine for a measured article about the royals, because you just assume that they would be quite fawning. But she's the only one who kind of even hinted at the fact that going forward, Harry and Meghan need to be careful that they don't, you know, fuck it up.
Yeah.
She said, "With the Sussexes fending for themselves outside the infrastructure and cachet of the royal household, a lot is riding on the choices they now make. There is currently little sign of their star power fading, but who they work with and what they do next could significantly rewrite their place in the history books." So it's the only one that doesn't assume that everything that they do going forward is going to be perfect.
It's so tricky, because immediately then we started seeing reactions in other newspapers, like The Times, which is the British newspaper of record, and they were not happy that, which is understandable, that Meghan hadn't invited them to the engagement, and they covered it in a way that laid that quite bare, I thought. The piece said that it was the first example of what the couple have described as their revised media approach, in which they will provide access to credible media outlets focused on objective news reporting to cover key moments and events. In coverage that could hardly be described as objective, however, the Harper's Bazaar story called Meghan inspiring, spoke about her time in the royal family as a golden era, and criticised other members of the royal family for not standing up for them during the darkest times. It is tricky because the coverage of Meghan was so negative as to be ridiculous for so long. Now this approach means that it's swinging in way too far in the other direction. It does suggest that when they say they want credible media outlets focused on objective news reporting, they want friendly media outlets focused on exclusively positive news reporting. Obviously, you can understand them not wanting to invite the outlets that they are suing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a wise media approach, and it does leave them open to criticism.
But it's an understandable one.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily a subjective thing to say that Meghan is inspiring, because we've heard from so many people at the events that she's gone to that she has literally inspired them. So many people seeing a biracial woman in this almost this exclusively white space up until her arrival, you know, that is important. But when you link it with the kind of the talk of the golden era, then you kind of muddy that.
Speaking of the darkest times, we should give a little update on Prince Andrew, who I think we talked about it all last week, very unusually. But last week we did learn from the Telegraph that Andrew has hired Britain's most respected extradition lawyer to fend off an FBI inquiry into his friendship with the dead convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew is reportedly receiving legal advice from Claire Montgomery QC, who is the leading expert on extradition law and is believed to charge £1,000 an hour for her services.
You know who can't afford that on his own? Prince Andrew.
Andrew, who doesn't have a job anymore. So naturally, everyone's first question is, who's paying?
Yeah, I feel like on his actual pension, he could afford 20 hours a year.
And also this made me so furious because we're hearing so much about who's paying for Harry and Meghan's security. And while that is a very legitimate question, I am far more comfortable with my taxpayer funds being used to pay for someone's security than I am to pay to defend a man who doesn't want to talk about hanging out with his buddy, the convicted paedophile, for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we should be protesting. Everything I hear about Andrew now just makes me want to, like, march down to Buckingham Palace with a sign and just stand there forever, because I'm terrified of people losing interest in this.
Claire Montgomery's clients have included Augusto Pinochet, the former dictator of Chile, and Nirav Modi, who is currently wanted for his role in India's largest bank fraud, which amounts to £1.5 billion. So this is just brilliant company.
The Telegraph notes that the identities of Andrew's legal team have been shrouded in secrecy, with palace aides avoiding repeated questions with the excuse that Andrew is no longer a working royal, and as such, they do not represent him. The palace will say only that the issue was being dealt with by his legal team, and yet refuses to reveal their names.
And, you know, the palace won't say who is acting for Andrew, but they will sure as hell start including him in the court circular again.
Yeah, this is some fucking bullshit. We said it before when we learnt about him delivering the Queen's message to the Chinese ambassador that, look, they're going to start sneaking Andrew back into royal duties. And I think this is more evidence towards that. So on Monday, he was at a memorial service for a senior courtier with the Queen's blessing while she was off at Westminster Abbey. And Dan Wootton at The Sun said, the fact it came when the Queen was at the Commonwealth Day service will fuel suspicion that he was being sneaked back into royal life.
Consider our suspicions fueled.
Yeah.
We saw in the court circular, which is the official record of past royal engagements, that it said the Queen was represented by some other dude, but that the Duke of York was present. This is the first mention of Andrew, the Duke of York, since November when he stepped down from royal duties. So why is this being recorded as a royal engagement? Is this evidence that he is creeping back in? We saw a friend of his tell The Sun he was dipping his toe in the water by going to the service, but plans to go to more engagements soon. He's innocent. He doesn't see why he shouldn't return to royal duties. He still has a lot to offer. Huh?
What the fuck? I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, because, of course, Andrew is like, this should never have happened. I should always be allowed to do my pitch at Palace and go to Mummy's events for Mummy.
I do think this is part of a new PR strategy, though, because we heard as well this week that he has hired the crisis management specialist, Mark Gallagher, who, according to the Telegraph, has been dubbed the backroom fixer.
Bloody hell.
His private clients over the last 6 years have included those falsely accused of child abuse.
So is he looking to manage his reputation a bit before Beatrice's wedding?
Looks like it. On Monday, the US Attorney Jeffrey Berman said that contrary to Prince Andrew's very public offer to cooperate with our investigation into Epstein's co-conspirators, an offer that was conveyed via press release, Prince Andrew has now completely shut the door on voluntary cooperation. And he added that his office was considering its options. Oh my God. Then by Friday, we heard that they had finally made contact. A spokesman for Berman told the Telegraph, there have been communications through his attorneys, but we have been informed that he is not willing to submit to an interview.
Now, this exactly follows on from what he said in that interview where he said,
if push came to shove and the legal advice was to do so, then I would be duty-bound to do so.
So now what he's done is he's found the lawyers who are going to say to him, don't do the interview.
But his whole statement after the Newsnight interview was him saying that he was willing to cooperate. So he effectively cancelled out what he had said in the interview about legal advice and all that shit and just said, yeah, I'll do whatever you want.
It's almost like he said what he said on the interview and then somebody else wrote something for him to release afterwards.
I just think this is so disappointing, and I'm really surprised that it's not getting a lot more play.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you know, with the virus and everything, there's loads of other stuff going on. But we are still seeing, like we saw a story today about how Archie is apparently going to be spending summer in Balmoral with the Queen. Like, who gives a shit? That's fucking ages away. And we're seeing stories about how Meghan and Harry are going to be opening an office at Soho Works in London, and all these stories about Meghan and Harry, and it's like, okay, we've already had all the Meghan and Harry stuff. Now you're just like having these really tangential stories, when I want to know what the fuck is going on with Andrew, and why the hell is he not willing to submit to an interview when he very publicly said multiple times that he was willing to cooperate with an interview.
Well, let's lower our blood pressure and move on to our quote of the week.
What is it for you this week, Tom?
I think I would probably take a quote from Harry's prank call. So this is when the hoaxers asked him about Meghan and himself stepping down from royal duties. He said, "I can assure you, marrying a prince or princess is not all it's made out to be." I can't wait for that line to be used in, like, A Christmas Prince 7. Maeve, do you have a fit for a queen?
You bet I do, Tom. There can only be one. Meghan at the Commonwealth service on Monday in Emilia Wickstead. I was obsessed with this. I saw this on TV when she was getting out of the car and that cape was blowing in the wind. It was so dramatic, so cinematic. I was obsessed with it. Emilia Wickstead is a New Zealand-born, London-based designer. She's a real favourite of Kate's, but Meghan has also worn her designs before, most memorably on her visit to Dublin in 2018, which is one of my favourite ever. Meghan looks such amazing. But what was particularly memorable about it was that it came very shortly after Emilia Wickstead had said some surprising, rather unkind things about Meghan's wedding dress. She alleged that it was a copy of one of her own designs. So it was really striking that Meghan chose to wear one of her outfits after all that commotion. And now she's wearing her again with a William Chambers hat, heels by her favourite Aquazzura, and her Gabriella Hearst bag that we've seen before, which was very unroyal, but the rest of it was very royal. And I thought it was a big swing. It was, as I was saying, very cinematic with the scarf, the cape detail blowing in the wind. But admittedly, there were some issues with the fit, which I realised later when we saw the pictures. But overall, like, yes, there was like bunching and it was not ideal around the bust and the waist, but I don't care. The footage of her walking in from the car was just so stunning.
Do you think Harry liked it, even though the feather from the hat apparently tickled him when they were sitting down?
Well, Harry's lining was done in the same shade of green to match, which was adorable. I mean, there was so much symbolism here. You know, you have the cape flying in the wind, like them flying away. The green, obviously, green, the colour of spring, the colour of new beginnings, new life. The fact that Harry's lining matched was, you know, a very strong show of support, them being coordinated, they're on the same page. Also, you know, lots of people pointed out it was the same colour that Kate wore rather a lot on her tour of Ireland the week before. Some people said this was her showing Kate how it's done. I was very interested in the sort of politics of their colour choices on this date. Now, my reasonable brain tells me that this kind of outfit takes weeks, if not months, to put together, and there's no way that Meghan was trying to have a dig at Kate, because she wouldn't have had time to do that unless clever Meghan realised that Kate was going to wear 100 shades of green in Ireland. But also the fact that Kate wore a red coat dress. We had previously seen it before on their church walk in Sandringham 2018. So on one hand, you know, the bitch on my shoulder is like, is she trolling Meghan's Safia dress from earlier that week? Or the angel on my other shoulder is saying, could this have been a show of support? or a nod to their walk together in Sandringham. I mean,
I love the bitch on your shoulder. I'm going with her.
she's winning, because why would you bother to do this big sartorial show of support and then not even bother to smile or say hello to Meghan when the cameras are on you inside? Anyway, back to Meghan, because she's got to be first in line this week, right?
Oh yeah, well, she's the only one who bothered to make an effort at the Commonwealth service. It looked like she was pleased to see anybody there, and obviously that incredible look while she was doing it.
Dressing for the history books. I really admired the way she planned out that final slate of engagements. It has to have been strategic, you know, especially her solo appearances, the one at the school and then with the Commonwealth students, really illustrated how much the royal family are going to lose in terms of diversity and inclusivity and modernity. Having those images of her surrounded by so many people of colour.
Yeah.
It was a very clear and very visual message that really spoke volumes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, she's from America and people love to talk about how Hollywood she is, but like, she's the only one who's making the royal family seem like it more closely represents the actual like makeup of the country and of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And losing that, like, I want to say they're so fucked, but, you know, they'll probably be fine. Next week, looking a bit uncertain, because we don't know what events will be cancelled, what might happen last minute.
What's going to happen behind closed doors. So we were thinking it would be a good time for us to do our deep dive into the royal wedding plans for Princess Beatrice and Edo-Mapelli Mozzi.
Yeah.
We have talked about it. We teased it a bit a few weeks ago, but we never have time to actually get into it. But hopefully that could happen next week. You guys have also been sending us some of your questions, which in general just about the royals. So hopefully we might have some time to answer some of those next week. If you have any others, you can reach out to us on Instagram and Twitter at airheadspod, or on Facebook Messenger on airheads, or you can send us an email if you want. Don't think anybody's ever used our email address, but it's airheadspod@gmail.com.
And if you like this episode, leave us a 5-star review and tell a friend. And until next week,
thank you so much for listening and have a great week. Bye.
Bye. Can you do an impression of anyone?
No. Although, when I get punchy late night on set, I always start to go into this like, oh, yeah, see? Come on, fellas, let's keep it moving. They like that.